inclusive institutions, sound money, and the importance of Roman law as the basis for Western civilization. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's October 19th, 2024. This is Krim Telco. It's a Saturday. There's no update for the year. We are up 14.7%. The market is up 22.9%. We're underperforming by 8.2%. So I want to draw an arch here between a presentation I attended by a professor of classics who was talking about the importance of the people's rights in the Roman Republic. And I want to draw this all the way till today and make an argument which is based on the Nobel Prize winning economist James Robertson, who I discussed just recently. He spoke about the narrow corner and the importance of having checks and balances between the Leviathan and society. And I think this presentation by the classics professor that I mentioned, the links are in the show note for about papers and all that, and who I'm talking about. So the point is that the Roman Republic, which was around for about 500 years until the Roman Empire was actually founded by Octavian after the murder of Caesar, around the birth of Jesus, so around that time. So fundamentally, the power of the people is directly related to the importance of the law as an institution. And I want to argue here that Roman law is the mother of all inclusive institutions, because what Roman law did, which is very unique, it put everybody at the same footing. It gave everybody the right to argue about, for example, property rights, or about being damaged by somebody else because your property rights were infringed. For example, Roman law was very anecdotal, very meticulous. It would cover things like if your goat, crosses over to the neighbor's garden and hits a tree, and then the tree falls on his goat, then who is to blame? Your goat, you, the neighbor for letting the goat in. So those kind of meticulous arguments were prevalent in Roman law. And if you want to abstract a little bit from there, you can see that this is all about property rights. It's all about externalities. It's all about moral hazard. It's the fundamental concepts that still occupy us, particularly in economics, and that still make ourselves sometimes even go to war for these things. Now, I want to make another argument, which is that sound money is another mother of all inclusive institutions. And having fiat money is actually the opposite of that, because you see, an inclusive institution is an institution that applies the same to everybody. And we have this tendency in particularly intellectualized, urbanized, academicized societies to move the inclusion a little bit away towards extractive. And what is extractive? An extractive institution is simply an institution that gives one party the ability to extract resources from another. So sound money doesn't do that. Property rights don't do that. So property rights, sound money, patent law, those are inclusive institutions. And I think the concept of the Roman people in the Roman Republic, which was discussed in this particular seminar at Stanford, which is important, of course. In my opinion, this is just the consequence of a much, much deeper and much, much more important development, which is the development of the institution of Roman law. And this is not a technical podcast here, so I'm not going to go into details of what the law exactly is and what its origins are. But let's just say that's a fact that over the centuries, during the Roman Republic, there has been a development of understanding that this inclusive institution of Roman law is accepted by everybody, the powerful, the poor, the strong, the weak. Everybody was under the law, something that we still talk about today. I think something that underlines the French Revolution and all the revolutions that came after that, in particular also the American Revolution, which of course happened around the same time as the French Revolution. But we are still living in that type of regime where we abide to the rule of law, which just, as the words say, we accept a higher power. It's higher than the sword and it's higher than the purse. It's higher than inherited kingdoms or anything like that. It's called the rule of law. That's a fundamental development that started with the Roman Republic. I mean, think about it in another way, right? We started with the Big Bang. We started with the cooling down of the plasma, the creation of atoms, the creation of elements, and then somehow nature developed DNA, amino acids, life, and somehow Roman law comes out of that. Think about it. What's the likelihood of that happening? So, to use David Deutsch's argumentations of creativity and imagination of humans and the central thesis that humans are the center of the universe, in a sense that they decide their own fate. Having said all of that, think about it. What is the likelihood that we go from Big Bang to Roman law? I don't want to even speculate about this, but we are where we are, and the institution of the Roman law is the foundation of the idea that people are equal, and the foundation of the idea that people are to be treated the same, at least with respect to something, in this case, the law. And there's other concepts, like I said, Habeas Corpus Act, for example, that nobody has the right to take to take possession of somebody else's body or property. The 14th Amendment, which puts that in our Constitution in the United States. We have patent law, same thing, like it doesn't matter where an invention comes from, the ability to patent it gives the person or the institution that has patented the particular idea a right to exploit the fruits of that idea. And now I want to make the leap towards sound money. I think that's not being discussed enough. Sound money, what I mean by sound money is rule-based money, like Bitcoin, for example, or gold, or even fiat money, but rule-based money. That's very important. So money that cannot be tweaked, the software that cannot be altered from inclusive to extractive. That's the key. So I would argue that sound money is the other mother of inclusive institutions. So the two big inclusive institutions that, in my opinion, are necessary for society to thrive are the rule of law and sound money. Now, the rule of law as a whole is, of course, a little bit more complex. One of the pillars of the rule of law is property rights. I think that's fundamental. Habeas corpus, so you have to have the right to your own property and the right to your own body. I would include also the right of future generations to their property and their body. In other words, we cannot indebt ourselves either financially or environmentally, and then let the mess be taken care of by future generations. So that is part of sort of intergenerational habeas corpus act that I'm working on an essay about this, maybe even a short story or a book. We'll see where that ends up. The working title is Chronopunk, and it's about a person that is sent back from the future back to 2006 and prepares a lawsuit against Ben Bernanke, who starts QE around 2009. And the argument in this particular story is that the beginning of QE is also the beginning of the end of Western civilization, because you're infringing on the property rights of future generations, and they need to be protected. So let's get back to today and this particular episode. Let me step back for a moment for new listeners. Why are we doing this? Why are we talking about the Roman Republic and empires collapsing and thriving and sound money and inclusive institutions. Well, the purpose of not even on podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. Now, we talk about this from the perspective of a hedge fund owner. So we run a hedge fund and we talk about lots of things. Of course, this is not investment advice. Please do your own work. But we hope to be able to inspire people to think along certain lines or disagree with us. Let us know if you disagree, of course. We appreciate also disagreement, actually, most sometimes even more than accolades. Some ideas might be wrong. We talk about positions. Sometimes we even talk about hedging or we talk about risk and all kinds of things. So in this particular case, this is obviously a little bit more general, but it's important. We're in the knowledge creation business. So it's not very clear which knowledge can be used at what point for wealth creation. For example, the knowledge that sound money is important for wealth creation could be useful at some point. So let's talk about it. Sound money is an inclusive institution because it applies the same to everybody. Whether you're Jeff Bezos or an illegal immigrant just came from Venezuela to the United States, you're exposed to the dollar, or even more extreme to Bitcoin, the same way. Bitcoin affects you the exact same way, whether you're rich or poor. The dollar, not so much actually, because there is the fiat economy and the fiat system and the Fed and all these things that sort of tweak the inclusiveness of the institution a little bit more towards the extractiveness. In other words, it gives certain elites more access to resources than, let's say, others would have. But that's, well, let me discuss this. So what is it we're talking about here? What's the fundamental idea? The fundamental idea is that in an inclusive institution, you have to, almost by definition, like that's the definition of an inclusive institution, is you should not be able to extract resources beyond what everybody else can do with respect to this particular institution, right? I cannot extract resources from you just by nature of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a rule-based system. If I want more Bitcoin, I can mint it, or I can go and create value in other ways and then be paid in Bitcoin. There's no other way for me to extract more Bitcoin out of the system. There are some tricks you can play, symbol tricks and things like that. There's a whole plethora of expressions in the crypto world for these things. But let's just maybe in an ideal world, an ideal rule-based money does not allow any kind of extractive shenanigans to enrich yourself. The same applies to property rights, and the same applies to patent law. And in general, the fundamental idea of Roman law was based on the same premise. And take the other side of that, take fiat money, particularly the kind of fiat money that we have right now in the United States, in Europe, and Japan. Fiat money is not an inclusive institution. Fiat money is an extractive institution because it gives the Fed and all the cronies around the Fed the ability to extract resources either for themselves or for their cronies. For example, the U.S. government can monetize that and redistribute it to black people or illegal immigrants or mentally ill people or whatever they choose to do with that money. They can print it and give it to that group, give loans to students, give loan subsidies to black men, things along those lines, particularly propagated by the Democratic Party. And there's also the other side, the Republican Party, that prints money to go fight wars and then distributes money that way to its cronies in the military-industrial complex. So by no means this is just one partisan side, but since we had 16 years of democratic rule recently, with one exception of 4 years, obviously the trillions of dollars of deficit and debt are more on the Democratic balance sheet than they are on the Republican balance sheet. So let's get back to the idea of the Roman law as the foundation for the right of the people. Well, you can't have the right of the people without the law, and you can't have the law without the right of the people. So I want to extend the concept of the narrow corner here a little bit, and I want to say that the narrow corner, which is the phrase by James Robinson, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in Why Nations Fail and What Makes Nations Prosper, and he talks about institutions primarily that are there, inclusive institutions that help nations prosper, and extractive institutions that make them fail. So, having said all that, I want to extend the argument a little bit that within that narrow corner, what we need to find is strike the right balance between the right of the people and the law. In other words, the law has to be for the people, and it cannot be used by the people to suppress other people. So the law has to be very careful. That's why jurisprudence in principle makes sense. But like the classics professor named alludes me right now, it's in the show notes. What he said when I asked him about this, he said that when the Roman Empire started under Octavian, jurisprudence became more, the Roman law turned into jurisprudence, which was more of an academic elite type of study. And I think what he alluded, without saying it, but I think what he meant is that it kind of became more extractive, right? The law starts being tweaked towards the elites. So a modern example would be, of course, let's say what some people call the deep state. So when the law is being bended such that it helps political agendas, environmental, climate change, DEI, racial politics, we can settle these kinds of questions in the marketplace of ideas, or if we're in power, we can just tweak the laws, change the rules such that it helps me. So, for example, I can make it illegal for Elon Musk to say something on X, and that's just the law, and he and all the people on the platform cannot comment on corruption that is happening within let's say, the environmental industrial complex in Europe or in the United States. So that's be an example of how formally inclusive institution, the law, turns into an extractive institution where we tweak the law. There's a word for that also used by an Argentinian economist. I have to find the name. I'll put it in the show notes if I find it. And it's political anomy. Political anomy, it's a word that is very difficult to pronounce. I'm sorry. Anomy just sounds like something you don't want to even ever have to say. But maybe I don't have a better word right now. What it means is basically the deterioration of norms and values. So why don't we just leave it at that? Forget this anomy word. The deterioration of norms and values. So we have a certain value, which is that we believe in the Supreme Court of the United States, and we follow the rule. And if the law is the law, we do it. If we start losing our faith in those kinds of institutions, then first of all, the law breaks down, but more importantly also the power of the people breaks down, because without the law, there's no power of the people, and without the power of the people, there is no law. Just look at Russia, look at North Korea, look at the church under the Inquisition, look at the Roman Empire versus the Roman Republic. You see the same patterns, which is the law starts being tweaked and twisted and bent towards the benefit of a certain elite, and then, of course, by definition, it's not inclusive anymore. So to summarize, this is a very nice example of a lecture that I attended in the classics department of Stanford about Roman people, but it's very relevant to today. It's something that is on our minds all the time, which is what the hell is happening with the United States? Why are we so polarized? Why can't we get stuff done in Congress? And part of the answer is because we have undermined the foundation of this country, which is the belief in an inclusive institution of the law. I think people have lost, particularly since COVID, I think a lot of people have lost faith in the law and other political institutions in the United States as being inclusive. In fact, they're extractive. The National Health Organization that was run by Fauci used to be seen as something that should help everybody, but turns out no, it suppressed a lot of people for the benefit of a few. Black Lives Matter should have been a movement that helps underprivileged people defend themselves against misconduct of police. It turns into a woke nightmare that even the people that should be benefiting from it most likely don't want to benefit anymore from, very similar to what happened during Bolshevism in communism, and even the workers didn't want this kind of Bolshevism that Lenin imposed on Soviet Russia. So it's very important to go back and understand these things. I think we can fix this very simply by strengthening the law as an inclusive institution, so by ridding ourselves of all these tendencies towards bending the law, let's say lawfare, by restricting NGOs that are financed by people like Soros to undermine the law and undermine the rule of law in the name of some sort of humanitarian action. And in fact, what they're doing is infiltrating cities, let's say, with illegal immigrants and then maybe giving them votes or doing, I don't even know what the exact agenda is there, but it's certainly not okay to bring thousands and thousands of people into a city, take over apartment complexes, finance this with money that is coming from billionaires like Soros, and then change the demographics of the city and make the people who have been living there either leave or fight a fight that they shouldn't be fighting. So, sorry for the digression a bit. Again, the fundamental idea of this particular presentation is, this episode, is simply that the power of the people is directly related to the validity and the power of the law, and that's actually a good measurement of how you can see whether a society is deteriorating. When the law is deteriorating, then the power of the people. So when the belief in the law, if we don't trust our law, our jurisdiction, if we don't trust our justice system, then we don't have power as people. That's the main message. Thank you.